everybody, and welcome back to our series on Samson. My name is Paul, and I'm one of the clergy at Hope Church, and it's lovely to welcome you here today. We are going to be continuing, although we're nearing the end, but we're going to be continuing with our sermon series on Samson. And today our text is Samson 16. So could I encourage you to maybe stop the tape or the recording here and have a look at Samson 16. It's that single chapter, and go make yourself a cup of coffee, have a read, and then we'll meet back here again as soon as you've done that. So stop the tape here, read the passage, and please do return. Welcome back. So we're looking at Samson 16, and we are 20 years on from where we left him at the talk last week. We saw that that last verse was Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated Israel, dominated the land. So I'm not quite sure what that dominated the land means, but it certainly does imply that the Philistines were a strong power even amongst where the Jewish people had settled. They were an enemy to be feared. Now, when we look at the first 20 years of Samson's life, there's quite a lot of fast living. I think that if Samson were to choose a car, he'd probably choose an Aston or a Ferrari. We saw that there's anger. One of the things that Samson feels a lot is that sense of anger. The red mist descends from time to time. And of course, there's the affair that he has with the Philistine woman of Timnah, which ends in such a tragic way, with the woman being set alight, burned to death by her own people. And we can see already that Samson is somebody with an eye for women. He's a womanizer. Samson at 40 is not very different, I'm afraid, from the Samson that we met when he was 20. Samson in his 40s is very much like Samson in his 20s, which is a really sad thing, because he's still in the same pattern of living. He's still skirting with danger. He's still chasing women, and he hasn't, I think, come any closer to God. In fact, if anything, he's moved further and further away from him. And as we start this chapter, Samson, the judge, who's kind of looking after the well-being of the people of Israel, what's he doing? He's traipsing off to Gaza. He's going on a trip of several miles, and he's going to put himself in the place which is the capital city of the Philistines. This is a place of real danger that he is putting himself into. But I guess he feels kind of invincible. And why is he going to Gaza? It's not in order to have any sort of high-level discussions or parley with the leaders of the Philistines. No, it's nothing like that at all. He's going there because of his womanizing instincts. He goes there in order to find a prostitute and sleep with her. It's kind of as if he's fed up with the women of Israel, and he wants to try something new and something different and something more edgy and something more dangerous. And so here he is alone in the lair of the enemy. Now, I guess that he's aware that he is putting himself in danger, even though the strength of his desire for that woman sort of overrides that sense of caution. And so he doesn't stay till dawn, but gets up at midnight, aware that he has to exit the city. Interestingly, though, he goes to the city gate, but he doesn't kind of prise it open with his strength and sort of slip out. No, what he does is he takes a whole gate of pillars, of posts, everything, and he carries them away. He wrenches them from their hinges and carries them away and carries them back to Israel, a bit like booty, like this is his prize, so to speak. So what's he doing here? He's not just preserving himself, he is humiliating the enemy. He's saying, I can come into your capital city, I can sleep with your woman, and I can tear away your gates and take them back to my land. It kind of gives you the impression that he's driven not just by lust, but by pushing the envelope as much as he can into the place of danger. There must be some kind of endorphin rush, I suppose, that he gets from being in the capital of the Philistines, of consorting with this woman right under their noses, and of being able to not just creep out, but make as much havoc as possible as one man can do on his way out. And I think what's happening is that he's fallen into a sense of security in his own invincibility, security in his physical strength, which is a false sense, because the security doesn't come from the strength itself. The security comes from a gift that has been given by God. And the trap I think that Samson's fallen into is forgetting the whole sort of context of how that gift is his for the time being. He doesn't consider the side of his own commitment to God. The commitment was made very, very early on in his life. And he expects now that he's got this strength by rights. And so he can just come in, come out, do what he wants, because nobody can touch him at all. You remember the saying, nobody can touch a hair on his head, so to speak. He can get away with it. So as he leaves Gaza, motivated both by a desire for his personal safety, but also by a desire to humiliate the Philistines, he feels powerful and he feels self-sufficient, and he's lost complete sight of the reason why God has blessed him. And so here is one question of 3 for us to consider later on in our chat. Question number 1, and this will come up on the screen as well, or in the email. Why do you think God will bless you? How does that display in your attitude of obeying him in ways that sit easily with you? And how does it display in ways that naturally you find quite hard? Let me repeat. Why do you think God will bless you? And how does that display in your attitude in obeying him in ways that sit easily with you and in ways that you naturally find hard? So back to Samson. And what we realize in this passage is that God has blessed Samson, but that blessing is not forever. A bit later, guess what? He falls for a woman again. And again, this is a woman from among the Philistines, Delilah. Delilah is associated with the word night. Delilah living in the valley of Sorek. So once again, he's been roaming, not to Gaza this time, but to Sorek. Why on earth was Samson scouting around for a sexual thrill when his real calling is to be the judge for Israel and to be preserving their well-being and their safety? It just goes to show the power that a pattern of sinfulness can exert over one. Otherwise, the man boggles. Why go back into Palestine? He can't have fallen for Delilah for her character, I don't think, because there wasn't a long period of pre-acquaintance and of getting to know you. It's just lust, and it's a desire to show exercise of power and exercise of strength in the face of the enemy. But the Philistines aren't about to give up, are they? There must be some way they believe that they can gain control over this man. So their entire leadership approaches Delilah to hatch a plot to see how Samson can be reduced down from his supernatural strength. And it must have been clear to them that he was completely besotted with her, and so weak in that area. As long as they could remove his physical strength, then they would be in control. So there's a game of cat and mouse, because Delilah, of course, buys into the plot. She's offered a massive amount of money, and she buys into the plot. And so a little game of cat and mouse ensues, where she's asking him to tell her what the secret is of his strength, and he gives her false answers, quite colourful false answers actually, and she follows the direction that his answers give, and each time, of course, she fails. This happens 3 times. What is it that they say? 3 strikes and you're out. So, but before we get to that, don't you think it's incredible that Samson, surely understanding and knowing Delilah's intentions, doesn't just up sticks and leave? No, she tries to winkle the idea out of him, the secret out of him once, and he knows what she's doing, and she tries a second time, and he still knows what she's doing, and he's still there, and she tries a third time, and he's still there. A patsy, really. He's bound hand and foot already by his desire for her. And then she plays her trump card, of course, doesn't she? This isn't a loving relationship. It's a relationship of mutual exploitation. She's in it because eventually she thinks that she's going to gain kudos and glory and money from handing over a weakened Samson. And he's in it because of the sort of the rush from being in danger and the pleasure that he is obtaining from his relationship with Delilah. So, as I said, she plays her trump card. She uses that line, "If you really love me, then you'll tell me." And this is where Samson thinks, ooh, maybe I'm at risk of losing this relationship. Maybe she'll then turn around and say, well, you don't love me, and if you don't love me, then I don't love you, and I'm going to leave, and you're going to lose me. That's a card that she plays, and Samson falls for it, and he this time reveals his secret. He tells her about his special vow to God. He tells her actually the last remaining condition of the vow, because of course he's broken the vow not to touch dead things, hasn't he? And he's broken the vow not to drink wine, and he hasn't really been in touch with God, and hasn't really been obedient to God. But still, he tells her, "This is my this is my strength. My strength is from my unshorn hair." And so she lulls him to sleep, and he gets shaved, as we know. And I wonder whether he thought to himself, as he was telling her, actually, even if I tell her, I've had this strength for so long, I've broken so many bits of my vow, so many elements of my vow. If I break this other bit, I think God will still come through. God will still look after me. And maybe that's a familiar, maybe that rings a bell for one or two of us. But as I said, 3 strikes and you're out, and he wakes up and his strength is gone. It's gone, and that means God has left me. He says he didn't realize the Lord had left him. 40 years, 40 years of dedication in the beginning, and then the breaking of his vow, and the fast living year after year after year after year. But now has come the breaking point in that relationship, and God has left him. How did the judge, to whom God had entrusted his people, come to something like this? because he lived year after year after year without dealing, or without even attempting to deal with his issues. Not attempting to deal with them, but actually allowing them to draw him further and further and further away from his calling. The hook had hooked into him and was pulling him deeper and deeper into sinfulness. So I think it's plain, probably, to say that Samson probably believed that his strength was not going to leave him. Even as he revealed the secret, he thought, oh, God's going to be with me. And so I want to come to question number 2. Question number 2 is this: where in your life do you need to rely on God's grace rather than on your own strength? And how would doing this change your actions? Let me repeat it again. Question 2. Where in your life do you need to rely on God's grace rather than your own strength? And how would doing this change your actions? So let's move forward into the final part of the talk today. Samson lost his strength. The Philistines came and didn't want to kill him. They wanted to have a living trophy. They gouged out his eyes. And they took him in triumph back to Gaza. They took him to the city where he had humiliated them. The humiliated Samson in the city he had once humiliated. And the story of Samson is the story of destruction of a relationship, but it's not the destruction of the Delilah-Samson relationship. It's a destruction of the God-Samson or Samson-God relationship. That's a relationship that falls by the wayside. Because from the Samson side, there'd been not very much communication with God, not very much prayer, not very much repentance at all, no engagement with the Lord whatsoever. No confession, no awareness of weakness. You know, reconciliation isn't just saying, I've done wrong, but it's saying, I'm heartbroken, God, about having done wrong, and I want to turn away and I want to start anew. I want to go on a different path. I want to put aside that addictive behavior, addiction to sin that has characterized my life. And the truth is that this is hard. It's not easy. It's not easy because we are fleshly creatures, and we are, if we're not careful, we are bound by our flesh. And I mean flesh in the fullest sense, the way, our personhood, so to speak, with its flaws. Change is hard. And at the very deepest level, it's hardest when we don't trust God. We doubt that God fully loves us, and so we don't trust him enough. And if we don't trust him enough, then how are we going to change? We change only when we allow him to move us to a new posture, a posture of trust rather than a posture of mistrust. And the habits that have been formed are really hard to break. But if we don't make an effort, they just get more and more and more dominant. I imagine that Samson used to sleep around amongst the Israelite women. But then he moved into trying to find Philistines. And first of all, he found a Philistine woman who was a prostitute. So effectively, it was transactional. He paid her and she slept with him. But then he moved forward into finding somebody who is higher up the status scale, if you wish. And Delilah presents as somebody who is, she's strong, she's a mature woman, and she comes into this relationship not as a prostitute, not because she's being paid. There is something here that reminds us a little bit, I think, of Jesus. As we go forward to look at the very ending with Samson in the temple of the foreign god, let's have our minds also in parallel upon Jesus. because there is a shadow here, isn't there, of the man who is bound and the man who is whipped or tortured, and then effectively we'll see at the very end the man who dies with his arms outstretched, and in dying brings death to others. Now, it's just a shadow, and of course what Jesus has done is Jesus lived among us, and then he died on the cross for us. He was buried, all this time obedient to his Father, in total communication with his Father, and he rose again. And he has sent his Spirit to be with us. His Spirit is the one who builds our trust and engages with us and brings us our gifts and sees us exercising those gifts, not in our own strength, but in the strength that we have been given. God is calling us into a relationship with him, just as Samson was initially in a relationship with God. Samson was called. We are called into a relationship with God. Why? So that we can experience a new and better life. And by doing that, we can spread a new and better life opportunity to other people as well, through them encountering Christ in the Word and in the Spirit, and hopefully in our actions. And the thing is this, that even if one has ignored God for decades, the way that Samson had, it's not too late to trust him. As long as we draw breath, it's not too late to trust God in his relationship with us. So see what happened. The Philistines, they had this great festival for their god Dagon, and masses of people came to the temple. And they decided, let's bring our trophy out. Let's bring Samson out so we can make fun of him. And Samson's hair has grown now. And I wonder whether that, and they haven't actually shaved it, which is interesting. And I wonder whether that growth of Samson's hair is not kind of a metaphor for a regrowing of his faith in God, of his hope that he might be once again in a proper relationship with him. And so Samson, as he's there, as he's the trophy, as he's being sort of displayed to everybody with his hands against the pillars, he cries out. He cries out to God. Let's hear what he says. Let's hear what he says. Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me again. Oh God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes." Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple. Pushing against them with both hands, he prayed. You see, he's praying again. He prayed, "Let me die with the Philistines." And the temple crashed down on the Philistines, the rulers, and all the people. Finally, Samson has called out to God from within the depths of his heart. He's called out to God. He demonstrates great faith. Still, I would suggest to you the old Samson sort of glimmers through. Why does he want God to do this? He wants it to sort of avenge his blinding rather than display God's glory. But, God doesn't necessarily sort of disqualify him because of that part of the motivation. He demonstrates great faith, actually, in the midst of his enemies and blind. He says, "God, I trust that you can do this. I trust that I can come back into that relationship where I was initially set and where I flourished. Please give me a sign that that is the case. And through this sign, let me be avenged. And in a way, let your people be avenged as well." So yes, Samson is a poor shadow for Jesus. He's a poor shadow for Jesus. He lived in thrall to his lusts, and he sacrificed his life to kill the enemy. Jesus lived in obedience to his Father, and he sacrificed his life to make his enemies his friends. So enormous difference, even though we can see some sense of foreshadowing. And we are born with a nature just like Samson's. This is the cautionary note, isn't it? We're born with weaknesses. We are born with weaknesses that, if we don't live in a close relationship with God, can run away with us and can create havoc sometimes in our lives and even in the lives of others. But we have the Holy Spirit constantly there for us. We can call on Him, and He can come, and He can permeate our lives and allow us to push away those temptations, to follow the weaknesses of our nature, and encourage us forward to be in a constant relationship with God. Jesus is the infinitely better Samson, isn't he? And through his Spirit, we can become infinitely better ourselves. And so here is our final question. Question 3. How does the manner and outcome of Samson's death move you to appreciate and praise Jesus for his? Let me read that again. How does the manner and outcome of Samson's death move you to appreciate and praise Jesus for his? Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to seeing some or all of you, I hope, at our 11 o'clock chat. See you later. All the best. Bye-bye.